I'm Anthony Newbold. Welcome to the show. My guest this week is the Minister of Immigration and Financial Services, the Honourable Brent Symonette. Minister, welcome to the show.
Welcome. It's a pleasure being with you, and welcome, Bahamas.
Thank you. And let's get to immigration. Okay. Always a hot topic. First, is everybody clear about what's supposed to happen to this new immigration bill?
I hope so. The new immigration bill is about 133 pages. It's a work that has been undertaken by the Department of Immigration, my ministry, Dame Anita Allen at Law Reform, and the Office of the Attorney General. It's the first attempt in many years since independence to do a whole-scale re-amendment and look at the immigration status situation in the Bahamas, bearing in mind we had 2 referendums, and to try and come up with a bill that weaves the Constitution with what is reality on the ground today.
How long does the public have to
look at it? I don't want to set a time, because it is a serious issue. It's something everyone should read the bill and comment on. So let's let the summer go through. We'll take a look at it at the end of summer and see what happens. But it's not something that should be rushed. This has serious, very serious implications.
Let's stay with immigration. Mm-hmm. You passed some amendments recently in the House, and people have an almost paralyzing fear that this opens the floodgates and we are overrun by people taking our jobs. Comfort them.
Okay. There's 2 issues, and I think it boils down to 2 issues. One is the 14 days, part of the amendment. The other is, as you say, the floodgate that's opening up. The amendments that went before the House Assembly were put into practice by me almost a year ago as a result of a cabinet conclusion. Up until that point, there were no real guidelines for immigration officers to decide whether or not John Doe could come in the country. So we've had situations, say for instance in Grand Bahama, where the head of American Airlines for the Caribbean came to Grand Bahama to look at the possibility of a new flights. And the immigration officer said, you need a short-term work permit. And he said, give me my passport back, let me get back on my plane. And I went back to Miami, and we got no new flights. The head of Carnival was put in for secondary questioning. So the discretion at the airport had to have some policy to it. So we came up with this policy, 14 days.
Which means what now?
Means you can come in, for the work specified, which will come to the second part of the bill, for a maximum of 14 days. The average tourist to the Bahamas is about 2.9 days. So, but this does not mean that you can come in 14 days, go out for a day, come back in for 14 days, go out for a day, because the immigration officer will see that stamp in your passport and he will deny you entry. So the idea for the 14 days is for someone coming in, let's say, to Atlantis or Bahamar, to come and see, let's say Atlantis was doing a restructuring recently, so they would bring in their international lawyers, their accountants, the board of directors, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the idea. They could come in for a maximum of 14 days. You know, around the world, when you enter countries, they give you sometimes 90 days to come in as tourists. We restrict it. So we need to look at that whole system and broaden it, because we're a tourist industry, we're a financial services industry. 14 days will go over 2 weekends. People are highly unlikely to be here for 14 days.
So there's no fear. People shouldn't think that
absolutely not.
This is
absolutely not. I can understand where this part is, but the immigration officer reserves the right to refuse you entry at any time. So if he sees you're abusing that system, end of subject.
We've heard always about a backlog in immigration.
But hang on, there's 2 sections of that bill.
Tell me about the second section.
One was the 14 days.
One is the 14 days.
Okay. I originally asked my cabinet colleagues for 21 days. We settled on 14, which we figured was enough time to do...
For somebody to come
and do an audit, do a restructuring, et cetera, et cetera. Bearing in mind, we want to promote the Bahamas beyond tourism, beyond financial services, and we want to create headquartering, and you go into the Commercial Enterprise Act, new industries that are not here. So that's the thrust there. The second part of the act, which caused a little bit of, well, quite a lot of consternation out there, was the list of persons that were allowed to come in. So it was people could accept the CEO, the chief financial officer, chief executive officer, etc. Once you got down to the bottom end, persons were scared. I mean, the lawyers, accountants, consultants, etc. And I think persons picked up those categories, and social media and whatever took over. Now, let me be very clear on that. The section of that that applies is you are coming in for the sole purpose of a meeting with a local company.
Okay.
Okay? So you're coming in to meet with Bahamar, you're coming in to meet with Atlantis, you're coming in to meet with the Public Health Authority or whatever one. You're not coming in the case of lawyers, to appear before the Supreme Court to argue a case. Okay. In that case, you need the permission of the Bahamas Bar Council and immigration. There are deadlines like that. In terms of accounting, a foreign accountant cannot come in, sign an audit, because that is an area reserved for Bahamian accountants under the accountancy provisions. They're the only ones to sign up. So it's very clear what the law says. Coming in for a meeting with a local company. Full stop.
Okay.
And it's not intended to displace any Bahamian whatsoever.
Okay, that's pretty clear. Hopefully people get it.
See.
Backlog of immigration. Work permits, citizenship, what's the backlog about?
Okay. We have work permits. I think we're doing a good job. And if anyone listening to this show is having difficulty, please contact me. So during the House of Assembly last week, which was last Wednesday, during the luncheon break, I approved applications that were made on the 8th through the 12th of April. That meant those persons physically applied for work permits during that time. So from all indications, the backlog on work permits is down to under 3 weeks, if all your documents are in order. So we shouldn't have any backlog. So if persons listening to the show have a backlog, please contact me.
Let me ask you this. Talk about applying for a work permit. You allowed to do that in country?
Yes.
Meaning you should have been here, you could have been here already working.
Could have been here.
You want an extension?
Well, that extension is a different issue. So a large percentage of work permits are renewals. So those are persons who are already here.
Who are already here.
So we give, I think, in the last 6 months, 10,000 odd work permits, of which 7,000 were renewal and 3,000 were new.
The majority of them were for what? Those work permits?
It's bottom-ended. So the bottom end will be gardeners, live-in maids, household staff, et cetera, et cetera.
And of course,
that's the largest percentage.
And of course, the people applying for these work permits are Bahamians.
Yes. On the whole, let's say, for instance, your expat community.
Yes.
They will bring in their caregiver or their personal assistant. Yes. But the majority of work permits, certainly in the gardeners section, are Bahamians. Yeah.
Talk some more about what you're doing at immigration, but we got to take a break, and we'll be back with more on a closer look after this. Welcome back to A Closer Look. I'm Anthony Newbold, speaking with the Minister of Immigration and Financial Services. Minister, we're talking about immigration, work permits. Which countries are these people coming from?
Majority of them come from the Caribbean, so you're seeing Haiti, Jamaica, Dominican Republic. That's the live-in staff are Peru, Philippines, that sort of area. Majority
of the work permits issued have always come from the Caribbean? No?
Majority.
Mm-hmm. Majority of them?
Yep. You'd be surprised. I think what we need to do as we go on, and just as a teaser for thought for the general public, is consider that Nassau is 200,000 people. Mm-hmm. Let's say we have, 50,000 households? How many work permits do we need to clean yards?
Yeah.
Maybe we should put a cap on the number of work permits there are work permits for people on Lincoln Boulevard. I don't just pick that area out, I can pick any street.
Yeah.
So we have to look at training Bahamians. Why are Bahamians not taking this job? What is it about certain jobs that Bahamians don't want to do? And I think that's a subject for possibly myself, the Minister of Education, BTVI. A good example, one area we have problem that I really have a difficulty with is air conditioning ductmen. Mexicans.
Do we teach that at BTVI?
Well, I'm talking with them now because that's possibly where we have to train Bahamians to do duct work. Because we're importing too many people to do that, which is a job Bahamians should do.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Citizenship. You don't have a backlog with citizenship.
Yes, we do.
You have
huge,
a backlog
huge
with
backlog.
citizenship. But how many you think?
I have no idea. One of the things the former minister Mitchell did was order this sign on a contract with Canadian Banknote to introduce the same system, the passport office we have at immigration. We need to now enroll the majority of those people. So the reason why work permits are coming out as quickly as they are is they are enrolled. So you go up to immigration, you hand in your documents. If your documents are not complete, they reject them right there. Say, come back tomorrow with the right documents. We have now started to put permanent residency and citizenship on that program. So if your documents are not complete, we reject you there. So a lot of the backlog is people who haven't supplied a school record or a birth certificate, etc. And it just sits in a file. So the other day we moved down to another building, which we're going to open to the public on July the 1st. And I think we moved about 3,500 active files. Yeah. There was no catalog. So my staff are now cataloging those files to see what is needed, the names, and hopefully so when someone calls in, we'll be able to type it up on the screen and say, yes, your file is here. Because there's 400,000 or 500,000 files in immigration.
Immigration, citizenship, work permits. There's 400,000 or 500,000 files. Catalog them, meaning enter them into this new computer system.
Well, what we did certainly with work, in a number of cases, work permits. So if you hadn't got a renewal of your work permit in a year, we wrote a script for the computer, we rejected them. So a lot of people got their work permits rejected because they hadn't had one in a year, which that forced them then to enroll in the computer system. So we know what the backlog is. So on the computer system since September, we have covered probably 98% of the work permits that have applied.
You don't apply to have your work permit renewed. You can get deported, can't you?
Yes.
You do that, the police do that, you have to work with the police?
Well, we have an investigation unit in immigration. We do it. And I think you might have heard that I talked about it's in the press a little while back, about $5 million outstanding in work permit fees, and gave a warning that if you didn't have your permit, we'd pick you up. A lot of people would walk around with their letter of approval and not spend the money. It's amazing how many people came in and paid. Another issue, just while you have a work permit to work for me, and you're found working for Fred down the road. You are working illegally with Fred down the road, and you can be deported for that. Because the work permit is only for Anthony Newbold.
What happens to Fred? Do you prosecute Fred for doing that?
We haven't got to a massive amount of that, but the new bill contains very hefty fines for harboring and also employing persons without a permit, and we have to start enforcing that.
And I was about to ask you that. This new immigration bill that's out for consultation, that would impact citizenship issues as well as work permit issues once that bill has been...
And people should look at the new bill because the issue with immigration, with citizenship, is very simple. Well, it's complex, but it's simple.
Yeah.
Persons born in the Bahamas to non-Bahamian parents have a constitutional right to apply between 18 and 19 years of age.
What about being registered?
To be registered as a citizen. The Constitution doesn't deal with what happens on 19 years and 1 day. It's a gray area, always has been. The Constitution doesn't give these people status from 0 to 19. So we need to do that. So this bill deals with, I think they call it a belonger or a right to abode, I think is it, which deals with that person who needs to go to school, needs a driver's license, or, well, they're under 18, but various areas, and quantifies that issue. It deals with what happens when you're 18 and 19, and then it deals with the person who does not apply, who sits back and does nothing after attaining the age of 19. I strongly advise people to look at that section because it is an area for serious discussion.
And we have no idea how many people out there who fit into these categories?
Thousands. Thousands.
You have enough immigration officers to deal with what you need to deal with up there at immigration?
Yes and no. The former minister hired some 200 odd immigration officers, some who failed the security, some failed health, some failed other tests, so we didn't hire all of them. The idea there was to get enough immigration officers at the ports of entry to reduce the $2 and $3 odd million overtime bill that we have.
Okay.
We need to privatize, no, let me take that word back. People might, civilianize immigration like we did with the police force. There are certain jobs there that do not have to be done by an immigration officer.
Okay.
We need more of those persons, computer data entry persons. And yes, we're looking at hiring some more people in that area.
You have this computer system that from all accounts appears to be a wonderful system. You're going to hire some more people. What then becomes your biggest problem at immigration?
It's contacting people who have applied for citizenship and permanent residency that are using their address as General Post Office. And you know how we all go, we change our cell phone 10 and 15 times. So quite often what we're doing now when we can't contact people, we're sending a list to the embassies of the countries concerned, and they're helping us find people. It's been very successful so far.
When people come in, of course, this is something I presume you work with the Defense Force, Border Control. You have that in hand.
I wouldn't say we have it in hand, no.
Meaning once they're here, you are
once they're here and we get them.
And you get them. And you get them.
You see, you've recently seen the police force have gone out and contracted a drone company, so that'll be down in Inagua. So, because a lot of these boats don't appear on traditional radar, so we hope that whole passage from Haiti, Dominican Republic, Cuba, coming up the southern part of the Bahamas into Inagua, we can get the persons right at that stage. Again, we hope in this year's budget to put in a detention center for Inagua. Prime Minister and I were down there. We talked to the person in Inagua about that. And the idea is to, when we apprehend persons there, they are processed there and returned to the country from there.
That they're originated from. Hold on, keep your thought. We got to take this final break and we'll be back with more Honorable Brent Symonette, the Minister of Immigration and Financial Services, after this. Welcome back to A Closer Look. I'm Anthony Newbold speaking with Minister Brent Symonette. Immigration, such a huge concern, really. What can the Bahamian people, what should the Bahamian people do to help this situation? Because we say, let the government do that or let the ministry do that, but it affects all of us.
No question. There's different spheres. So for instance, we talked about persons coming into the Bahamas and apprehending them. An island like Long Island is not a problem for apprehending because the citizenry there deal with the issue. So that's an issue. So some islands have to come to grips with what they're doing.
Right.
And there are persons in New Providence and at Family Islands who facilitate the illegal entry of persons. So that's an area we have to enforce in a stronger. The boat lands, a truck picks them up, they disappear into the community. So that's an issue we have to look at. And I think Bahamians have to look at what they want. Because we can't keep growing that section of the economy, of the population. There's only so many jobs available. So there's that issue. Another issue which is very interesting, hopefully we can chat on quickly, a number of Bahamians invite friends to come and visit.
Okay.
They then, after 2 weeks, take them up to immigration and ask for an extension. A lot of the extensions are legitimate. But then I find after that 2 weeks, they're engaged and married to someone else and applying for a spousal permit. There are too many trends like that we have to look at why is it happening. So I think the whole immigration spectrum has to come under a magnifying glass, because if you have a friend come up, they're coming for 2 weeks, how can they then afford another 4 weeks?
Yeah.
So what's the purpose? And these are issues that I think Bahamians on a whole have to look at why it's happening.
Yeah, and let me ask you this, because, and we think of immigration, and we only think of immigration in illegal immigration. Don't we need more people to help develop the Bahamas?
Well, that's a big issue, because a lot of people say you're coming to take away my jobs. And hopefully when we took on possibly another show, talk about WTO. You know, one of the things the government, the F&M government has done over the years is former Minister Mitchell tried to join the European partnership with the free SME, the CSME, the free movement of labor, and Ingram said no. And one of the issues with the current WTO application, we're saying no freedom of movement,
no free movement
of people. That's cut in stone. But having said that, there are sections, if we're going to grow the economy, like we talk about headquartering of businesses that have come here, yes. So for instance, a recent company came from Barbados, relocated here. I gave them 29 work permits. They paid $750,000 for the work permits. They will start hiring Bahamians. They will buy in the food stores. They'll drive cars. There'll be a lot of rent property. And over time, they will train Bahamians and replace those persons that came in. So that's really where we will see growth in the economy.
Is that something, as we talked, my question was about needing more people to develop the Bahamas. Is that something that might be considered in this new immigration bill that's out there?
It looks at the process of giving work permits, but that's a policy issue, not a legislative issue. So for instance, presently I have out for discussion an arbitration bill. It's laid on the floor of the House. It's out there for discussion. There's a lot of concerns in that area with regard particularly to lawyers, but if we can create in the Bahamas an arbitration center similar to Singapore has in Asia, we will create a whole new industry. People will have to fly in here for arbitration. You know, the Bahama arbitration was under the laws of the state of New York.
Yes.
That should never have happened. Should never happen in the future. All contracts made for work or services in the Bahamas should be subject to the arbitration laws of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. You fly in witnesses, they eat in restaurants, they stay in hotels, they rent cars, and so forth. There's a growth in the economy.
What's the future of immigration in your mind? Our whole immigration thrust here in the Bahamas.
I think you'll
and your department, actually.
Yeah, you'll see the Department of Immigration in this new bill. I think you'll see a lot of comments coming out. Citizenship, permanent residency. For instance, my daughter might marry a non-Bahamian. What happens when they want to move back here? These are all conversations I think we need to have, and the new bill will bring out. And I want people to be forthright and not necessarily they don't agree with what Brent's doing. You know, and let's look at the real core values of what immigration is trying to do and where we need to go with this country to make it a modern country for the next generation.
Is it likely that you will have, you, meaning the government, meaning the Department of Immigration, meaning the AG's office, is it likely that you will have town meetings to discuss this? Or
Yes, we're going to have town. At the moment, it's gone out to lawyers, accountants, the Haitian community, so on and so forth. But I think this has to be like we did with the women's rights, to go with a town meetings in different islands. It's too big a topic not to do it.
Whatever happens with this immigration bill, it will be left to the House of Assembly. This is not something that you're going to go and tamper with the Constitution with.
No. I think successive governments have had referendums, and I am constantly amazed on the referendum with regard to women married to foreign men, that did not pass in 2 referendums. It amazes me because the number of persons that come up to immigration and contact me and they want their children to be Bahamian, and we lost those 2 referendums. It astounds me.
Because there is a lot of Bahamian women married to foreign men.
I have 2 sister-in-laws. One's not married, her children are Bahamian. One's married to a foreigner, they're not Bahamian.
Yeah.
The children are not Bahamian, went to school here and everything else. There's no nexus with the other children until recently. Why?
Whatever happens with immigration, and again, is this something that requires a lot more education? Consequently, you're going to have to do something with the Ministry of Education. You know, people talk about having the Constitution taught in schools as a matter of course. Immigration affects everyone.
Immigration, I think, has been a subject for 30 years that we really don't want to bring to the forefront. It's an emotional issue.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people just don't want to discuss it in the way the immigration bill will do it.
Will force them
and I
to.
think we have to put it full and center stage, and we have to have serious look at it, because don't forget, in '73, the men and the team that went to England, they tell the story, and whether it's myth or real, that they wanted to come home for Christmas and they ended the Constitution. We'll leave that to myth or reality for another day. But they went with all good intentions of creating a constitution that would be a living document for the rest of time in the Bahamas. And constitutions have to move.
Yeah.
And this is an issue that possibly, no, we might not amend the Constitution, and the Immigration Act tries to weave between the Constitution and modern day reality.
Yeah, and we're going to have to leave, but we're going to have you back, because we need to talk about WTO and financial services. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching A Closer Look. Remember, you can check us out on Facebook at A Closer Look. We'll see you next week right here on A Closer Look.